Jack looked down. There they were, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. From 18,000 feet, the Kaga and the Akagi looked like toys floating in a bathtub. But he knew those toys were spitting fire. Going in, Jack grunted. He kicked the rudder and the world tilted on its axis. The Dauntless tipped over into a near-vertical dive. This was the moment of the dead man's drop. The G-forces pulled at his face, dragging his skin toward his neck. The speedometer needle spun madly. The deck of the carrier rushed up to meet him, growing from a speck to a monolith. Our fire flak burst around him in puffs of black smoke. Pop, 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 shrapnel tore a hole in his left wing. But he didn't flinch. At 2,000 feet, the world screaming in his ears, Jack pulled the release lever. The 1,000-pound bomb detached. He yanked the stick back, his vision narrowing into a black tunnel as the G-force drained the blood from his brain. As he leveled out just above the waves, he looked back. A pillar of orange flame and black smoke erupted from the center of the Kaga-S flight deck. It was a direct hit. The Japanese planes, fueled and armed for their own strike, began to cook off in a chain reaction of destruction. Jack wanted to yell, but his throat was dry. He checked his fuel gauge. He was low, dangerously low. He looked at the vast, empty horizon. He had just helped change the course of the war, but now he had to find a tiny postage stamp of an American carrier in 1,000,000 square. Miles of ocean or the sea would claim him just as surely as the fire had claimed the Kaga, while Dimitri fought 4 inches of rubble, and Jack fought 4 miles of ocean. Claire Valade fought for bits of paper. In occupied France, the war was fought in whispers. Claire worked in a small tailor shop in Lyon, sewing silk linings into suits for German officers. But her needles did more than mend clothing. Inside the hem of a high-ranking Oberst's tunic, she tucked a tiny, translucent slip of paper. It contained the coordinates of a hidden V-1 rocket launch site in the Pas-de-Calais. One evening, a man entered the shop. He was Lahibu the owl. He was her contact. "My wife needs her dress taken in," he said. The code phrase hanging in the air, "Is the occasion festive?" Claire replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "It is a wedding for a ghost." She handed him the finished tunic. As he left, Claire sat back down at her sewing machine. She felt a sudden, crushing sense of loneliness. Her brother was in a POW camp. Her father had disappeared in 1940. She was 22, and her entire youth had been consumed by the sound of jackboots on cobblestones. Suddenly, the front door burst open. It wasn't the owl, it was the Feldgendarmerie, the German military police. "Identification," the sergeant barked. Claire handed over her papers. Her hands didn't shake. She had learned that fear was a scent, and she had washed herself clean of it. They ransacked the shop, ripping open bolts of fabric and overturning jars of buttons. They were looking for the radio they knew was in this sector. They didn't find it. It was buried beneath the floorboards of the henhouse 3 miles away. After an hour of terror, they left. Claire stood in the middle of her ruined shop, picked up a single blue button, and began to sew. She wouldn't stop, not until the lights went on again in Paris. By April 1945, the world was exhausted. Dimitri was no longer in Stalingrad. He was on the outskirts of Berlin. He was older than his years, his face a map of scars and fatigue. The red steamroller had pushed the front thousands of miles. He stood on a bridge, watching the city burn. He didn't feel like a conqueror. He felt like a survivor. Jack Miller had survived his carrier landing at Midway. He had flown 100 more missions, survived a ditching in the Solomon Islands, and was now landing his Hellcat on an airfield in Okinawa. He looked at a photo of his sweetheart back in Iowa. She looked like a stranger from a different life. In France, Claire stood in a plaza as the bells of the cathedral rang for the first time in years. The ghost wedding was over. People were dancing, weeping, and tearing down the swastikas. The war ended not with a single stroke, but with a collective sigh of relief that shook the planet. 70 million lives were gone. Cities were ash. The very atoms of the earth had been split to force a surrender. Dimitri, Jack, and Claire would never meet. They lived in different worlds, spoke different languages, and carried different burdens. But they were bound together by a single thread of history. They were the generation that looked into the abyss and, through sheer stubborn will, refused to let the darkness win. Years later, Dimitri would sit in a park in Moscow. Jack would farm the cornfields of Iowa, and Claire would run her shop in a Free Lion. When asked about the war, they usually didn't talk about the battles. They talked about the friends they lost, the taste of a real orange after years of rations, and the incredible, beautiful silence of a world without guns. The war was a storm that had passed, leaving behind a scarred earth, but also a sky that was finally, mercifully, clear.